the Edmodo calendar because the rank size, I'll show you why. Let me close this one so we have some. Okay. I changed it a little bit. Rank size and central place, I had these notes as one. I've had to split them into two. So then these moved right. Nothing else has really changed yet, but so you're aware, we're a little bit behind. Okay. All right. And we start a little bit behind today from yesterday because we didn't quite get through the notes. Okay. Everything we did yesterday and our first bit of notes today are all level 2 stuff. Can you match it on a test? Can you hear Agora and no Greece? Can you hear Acropolis and no Greece? Can you hear Forum and no Rome? That's the level we need to get through on these notes. Okay? This first bit, we will come back to this a bit, so I do want to spend just a few seconds again on urban function. And let me ask you this. On a very, very simple level, start throwing out, without thinking about the definition of the word urban function, start throwing out me some functions of cities. What do cities provide for people? Okay, water, transportation, what? Entertainment, protection, electricity, education, markets. Don't forget that. That's probably the biggest one. In fact, when we talk about cities tomorrow, we're going to root it almost exclusively in markets. Okay? Almost exclusively in markets. So we know that cities are sometimes defined by numbers. What are the two baseline numbers we talked about? 5,000 and 10,000. I wish I could anchor it to one of the two and say this is where the AP board will live, but it's not part of the definition they've released to us. So thus, I don't think they will live in a number. In our hierarchy, the smallest is what? Hamlet, urban hierarchy or ranking. Hamlet's the smallest, basically no services, right? As we begin to gain a few people, but more so gain a few services, we call it a village. I think a town is like Elk River. It's pretty much fully functional. You can get pretty much, true or not, you can grow up, live, die, and never have to one time leave the city limits of Elk River. It might be a boring existence, but everything you need is in this town, correct? True. Okay. But in order to really experience life, you know that we begin to adventure well into the culture of cities and the other entertainment values that city offers. We talked about 3 urbans. Urbanizing of our world, urbanizing of Elk River, and the movement of people as urbanizing. All of those, like I said, are matching level question kinds of things. Oh, this fact is on your test. Number 1 migration flow in the world is rural to urban. Okay? Did any of you have something go on in your head when we were watching that huge growth of cities and population? Was there any kind of shock or wonderment or questioning? It's a pretty significant image. This is my hope that when you get a question about the change of cities in our world, that those 3 images pop up. Because it helps you get a lot about the trends of urbanizing. It's linked in the PowerPoint. If you have it on your phone, you ought to be able to just click right on it and go right to that BBC page. So, and we did Shenzhen, and we began the first urban rev, right? Got to hearths, got to specialization and function, Mesopotamia and right? What was the other one I had you write down? Mesoamerica, the Mayas and the Aztecs, the Egyptians. Okay. How far into the Greeks did we get? Okay, perfect. So really, folks, the Greeks become pretty significant in the development of cities. But I think, in the simplest terms, there's three simple, just factual recognitions of the Roman or of the Greek city structure that I think you should know for the test. I want to tell you these in the context of a little bit bigger story, if that's okay. Do you know anything about the geography of Greece? Most of us don't. It is a series of many, many islands. It is a peninsula, and it is very, very rugged terrain-wise. So what ended up happening is Greece developed as cities that were disconnected from each other. What made Greeks Greek was the language. Does anyone know what two Greek cities fought frequently? Chris? Athens and Sparta. Here's just to show you how different the Greeks were. Athenians were big into education. Aristotle, Plato, Socrates. Spartans were big into war. When Spartans were 8 years old, when Spartan males were 8 years old, they were sent to military training. They were removed from their homes to be trained to be soldiers. Athens was rooted in educating their folks. Okay? So, because they were not politically united, we called them city-states. Okay? Why I don't have city-states on this one, it is one of the three things I want you to write down, I do not know. But please write on this set of notes that the Greeks were city-states. And do you remember that from our political unit? It's a city that is also an independent country at the same time. Okay, so Athens and Sparta were in no political union whatsoever. They were entirely separate. Okay? The other two things that will most likely, if anything, about Greek cities show up on your test. On this test they will, on the AP test maybe. One is an acropolis, and in Greek, acro or acro means hill, and polis means city. So the Greeks, because of their mountainous, rugged terrain, built their cities on the tops of hills. They were defensible. They were the center of town. And the other feature of Greek cities that sometimes comes up in the presentation of what we're supposed to know about that is agoras, A-G-O-R-A's, and their markets. The Greek cities were centered around the marketplace. Okay. Questions? No questions? Okay, might I go on? Next slide just shows you an image of an old Greek structure, and it lists the terms. Rome. Okay. Rome, I can anchor you to probably 3 or 4 different things about Rome. Rome was not like the Greeks. All cities were united under one political empire. Cities of Rome did not fight against each other. Cities of Rome fought together. Rome was an empire. Here's an interesting question for you. I don't know if you will know the answer. Why do you first of all, have you heard the expression all roads lead to Rome?
Yeah.
And do you know why Rome had such a great road network?
They were
so widespread.
I want to say 2 questions. What's Chris?
Because they needed to get far.
They needed to move. It was a huge empire.
They needed to move far and fast.
What did they need to move far and fast?
Troops.
When you control a large empire, especially when the people you control are not of your own origin, you needed to get troops from one end of the country to the other quickly. So the Roman road system really assisted in their marketing structure, but it was a really big deal for their military movement. Here's the next question. The United States has a pretty elaborate freeway system. You know why it was built?
To move across the country faster.
To move military supplies across the country faster. Eisenhower was worried during the Cold War that the Soviets, they might have to have wars on two fronts. So he had the freeway system designed so that tanks and bombs could be moved from one end of the country to the other, much like the Roman road structure. Interestingly, I've heard this is true. I have not done a full survey of the country to figure out if it is true, but it is supposed to be true that on every so many miles of interstate that there is a mile of completely straight freeway so that planes can be landed.
I've heard that.
So the interstates are technically in their design also to serve as landing areas for airplanes, for military fighters. So that just tells you why the Roman road structure is so good. So this will not be on any test. Sorry that you've already gotten that far to copy it. What you will likely be asked about with Rome is that they had forums. The center of Greek life was the forum. The forum was market and central city all together. Have any of you ever participated in or heard of a forum as a discussion? A forum is a panel, a conversation, right? You heard that meaning of the word? That's what happened in the forum. It was the center of Roman cultural, political life. Okay, so Rome was, the forum was the center of culture and political life. The second thing that might be a testable question on Rome is its roads. All roads lead to Rome. Okay, did you know that the Roman Empire was this big?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have any of you ever heard of, I don't know why you would, but there is a wall called Hadrian's Wall. That is in the United Kingdom, built by the Romans. It's crazy. Romans were building walls over here.
Wasn't it used to say that they would not go further than that?
IDK. Okay? And then the other two things potentially that make Rome relevant are its aqueducts, which are these. These are canals carrying water. They're the Roman water carrying system. Okay? And because Rome was so reliant on bringing in water, it's often referred to as a hydraulic civilization. Hydrology and water go together. All right? I have not really defined it for you there. See what the Google has for it on urban hydraulics. Any culture having, of course, I've got a load of Quizlet to give the definition. Any culture having an agricultural system that is dependent on managed waterworks. So urban hydrology is managing water. This is, so you get it. Rome was not defeated by losing a war, it was defeated by having its main aqueduct knocked over. When the water stopped flowing into the city, the citizens fled Rome. The empire collapsed. That's how important management of water was to their society. Questions about Rome? If you get a question, it would be literally matching, hydraulic, aqueduct, hydraulic, roads, or forums. If you associate those four things on that level with Rome, memorize those, attach those in whatever way, shape, or form, you'd be good. Okay? These are the vocabs that I had you highlight on your outline at the beginning of the unit. The only thing on this that hasn't shown up yet is site and situation, and that's our next bit. Oh shoot, we got one more little thing first. Okay? What's that?
Can you go back? I didn't highlight those.
I can. The next thing we're going to do is just briefly record what happened during the second urban revolution. So if you just want to write down second urban revolution, I'm going to have you, again, level 2 stuff, things that could be on a matching. I'm going to have you record just a detail or two. Do any of you find it harder doing homework when the sun's shining and the weather's nice outside? Do any of you just find it hard doing homework anyway?
Yeah.
I just don't do homework.
Any of you find it hard doing homework with Netflix?
Not even that,
I don't even
just
eat
like.
Netflix.
You just find it hard to do homework?
Yeah, I mean, I'd
Browse, you got it?
rather just sit there and stare at the wall.
Okay, me too.
Okay. So just simple details about the second agricultural revolution. This is the reality around it. The only thing that it should show up in is associating it with the second ag rev, associating with the industrial revolution, associating it with Europe, associating it with the 17 and 1800s. The only thing we have not had a conversation about is some of the consequences that occurred in cities in Europe because of this rapid change. If you want to re-record, break a leg, wait, that's not the goal. Okay, don't break a leg. So when we got better at farming, when we got better industrialization, we know people moved to cities. We've already talked through that, correct? In fact, I even think I had you put second urban revolution in your notes last unit. Okay, so we're anchoring this back, recontextualizing it in this unit. So where, Europe, what, rapid growth of cities, when? There's 4 answers to the when. Second ag rev, industrial rev, 17 and 1800s. There's 3 answers to it, I guess. Why? Let me share some whys with you that we shared before. What happens when I'm a farmer and I get machines? I do produce more, but I also put people out of work, right? So where do they go? Cities. When I'm in the cities and I begin industrializing and building stuff, I need workers. So it was a natural migration of workers into the cities. Okay? The consequences is kind of the newer part of the conversation that we hadn't had. What do you think happens when cities spontaneously grow?
There's this farmland.
Sure. What happens to the city?
It becomes heavily populated very fast, and there's a lot of pollution.
Okay, so pollution was definitely a factor.
Higher crime rate.
No one?
Would it become like literally life?
Sure, but what does that mean?
Like jobs, more, like you said, stuff they need, other stuff.
Yeah.
Anything like food habits.
It's a fair question. I don't think they're like, hey, we have a lot of people moving in. We should produce a couple more theaters and maybe a restaurant or 2. The problem is they didn't think before people moved in. So the European cities really didn't get well planned. They didn't build the infrastructure to support the people, so getting rid of sewage and garbage and having enough electricity. All of those things that would make sense that you plan ahead as your city grows didn't exist. So the cities grew without planning and infrastructure, and they became polluted were 2 of the big consequences of this rapid explosion of population. So,
Can you repeat the why again?
Sure. Jobs in the city and loss of jobs in the country, those 2 factors. That's a more clear way of maybe saying it. But do you understand that machines in the cities made for, machines in the farms made for fewer jobs in the farms. Okay. This slide's taking a minute or two longer than I was thinking. That's okay. Do you get it?
Yeah.
All matching lower level stuff. All right? Or level 2 stuff, I should say. And that brings us to our question today, which asks us to point to an understanding of how it is that cities sit where they sit, and how cities relate to each other in the relationship of their size and function. Don't know if this question is the best wording, but we're going to talk about sizes and functions of city and how that shapes it. We're also going to talk about where cities end up being. All of it is kind of one conversation. Let me ask you this. Virtually every city in the world lies on water. Can you think of a city of significant size not on water? There are some, I'm sure, but one for sure of relevance. Two, I think, for sure of relevance. I don't know that Denver has a river. Someone has asked that. I did not Google it. Las Vegas does not have a river. But Las Vegas was built by the mob. The mafia wanted a place to launder its money, so it built casinos in the middle of the desert. That's just a true story. So it wasn't developed naturally. It was developed by people who wanted to hide a city. So one reality we know is that cities are built where the conditions are right. Okay? Do you remember from Unit 1 our conversation on site and situation?
No, I don't even remember.
I didn't suspect that you would, because that would have been 7.5 months ago. Should we redefine them? I'm going to describe to you, you can do what you want with the notes. I'm going to describe to you Minneapolis's site. The Minnesota River and the Mississippi River come together right at Fort Snelling. It was a great place for the westward expanding white settlers to defend themselves from the Native Americans because it was defended on two sides by rivers. It was also a great place to conduct trade. So those two rivers made it incredible. But Minneapolis became a major city because of another feature of the Mississippi River. The falls. What is different about a river near a waterfall? What is consistent about a river near a waterfall? Water's moving. How was moving water relevant in the beginning of cities? It turned the mills to power their industry, right? What is Minneapolis's nickname? Mill City. This is, I don't know why I'm going to share you this story because it's going to distract us from what I need to get us accomplished today. Minneapolis had a track, it laid concrete in the middle of the river to route the river so that it would run the mills. And then it was really the first power company of Minneapolis because it charged people to have access to the river to put the mills in the water. It provided them running water and they paid for access to the running water. Okay, but you go downtown Minneapolis, Gold Medal's on one side of the river, Pillsbury's on the other side of the flower, and what did Minneapolis mill?
Lumber.
Wheat. So what makes Minneapolis a great site to have a city? Two flowing rivers, primarily the flowing river of Mississippi, and then the valuable farmlands to make wheat. And all of a sudden you've got all of this industry upon which a city is launched. Okay? The situation of Minneapolis is different. And it's actually St. Paul that launches this situation on a big scale. Anyone know the richest Americans in the late 1800s and early 1900s?
What we talked about. There was one in Minnesota.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So number one is commonly, I think, John Rockefeller. Rockefeller was an oil guy. Carnegie was a steel guy. J. Pierpont Morgan was a banker guy. Vanderbilt was a steel. Vanderbilt steel too. Tires. I don't know what Vanderbilt was. And then fourth was James J. Hill. Okay, and he launched the railroad. The reason Minneapolis and St. Paul became significant, Chicago was industrial, Pittsburgh was industrial. Goods are moving to the west. Minneapolis is the launching point of goods to the west. So, wrong button. I have this photo on the Chrome. This is a picture, these are a bunch of pictures, of Minneapolis's switching yard. So along the river, okay, so here's the river, and here's the train tracks, and here's the warehouses. Because of our location as the westernmost city, every good coming out of Chicago and St. Louis heading to the northwest came through Minneapolis. The relative location of where Minneapolis existed launched it as a big city. So that's its situation. Okay? You could, in theory, if you have a question about location of cities, need to explain these in it. The problem with that is them expecting you to know sites and situations for different cities is a pretty far stretch, I think. But that's site and situation. Any questions? Okay. Your next challenge, I'm going to ask you to partake in, is this. I need to do some erasing. I need you to find me. I want you to work through this with me. I need the locations of, or excuse me, the populations of those 10 cities. Go. I'll do it up here. You know, this isn't a bad representation of understanding these terms. It would not hurt you to have these in your notes. It actually might make you understand it better. There isn't going to be a test question specifically about any of these cities or numbers, but it might paint you to a more clear understanding if you want to record them. Just start telling me some of them. What's New York?
8.406 million. Paris is 2.211.
For some reason, that number shows up, but a way bigger number shows up. And we need the way bigger number.
I found the one that they used last hour.
What was it?
New York, for which one?
For Paris. I don't know what measurement they're using, but the document that I have points to Paris in what we're talking about today being like 9.6. Anybody find like an 11 number more relevant in? So I don't know if there's a certain part of Paris or a Paris proper that is counted in that 2.1 and then a greater Paris counted in the, but I think the number's like 11.7 or something people have been finding today. Anybody finding something? What do you got?
Paris metropolitan area is 11.17 million.
Okay. And for the function of what how we're understanding location and development and emergence of cities, that's the relevant number, and I'll help you get that in a moment. Okay, what is LA?
3.9.
Oh, I like that one. Where's better? What do we got for Chicago?
No, I got a different one for Paris.
What do you got?
The wider urban area had a population of over 12.1 million in 2013.
12.1. Anything in that 11 to 12 range is going to work for what you're learning in our next lesson here. What do we got for Chicago?
2.7.
Okay. Anybody have Houston?
2.2.
2.1.
2.2 apparently.
And what do you got for Philadelphia?
1.5.
Yeah, 1.5.
Okay. BTW, you know what Philadelphia means?
Brother in love.
Do any of you know your Greek? Come on.
I
It means brotherly love.
got that.
Um,
Not because I know.
In Greek, there are 3 words for love. Eros, which is erotic love. Agape, which is God love. And then phileo, which is brotherly love. And Delphia is city of. So Philadelphia literally is a Greek word meaning city of brotherly love. You go to Philadelphia, there's no brotherly love. There are cheesesteaks, and cheesesteak owners don't get along. Lion, you own
474,000.
474,000. I heard like 1.41 something million. What do we got for Marseille?
850,000.
Okay, our numbers aren't quite lining up in order. Toulouse? I'm gonna put this at 1.1, which is a number I think I got last hour. Toulouse? It doesn't matter. It's gonna be less than 850, and you'll see this when we do the math. Grab a calculator and divide 8.4 by 3.9. And I'm gonna round it to a fraction. Guys, you get it?
We're at 2.15.
So it's 1 over 2. Divide 8.4 by 2.7. 1 over 3. Divide 8.4 by 2.1. 4. Divide 8.4 by 1.6.
5.25.
5.25.
For some reason, someone with enough time on their hands studying functions and sizes of cities figured out that in many, many countries, the city's rank will be inversely proportional. Excuse me, the city's population will be inversely proportional to its rank. Cities like the US that fall under this are called rank size states, rank size countries. If this math makes sense, if this makes sense, put it in your notes. If this makes sense, put it in your notes. This is free, this has been, not this part of it, but the next part of it. This is part of a free response question. So I'm going to point you to what those questions are and ask you then to think about how to own this in a level 3 or a 4 window. Okay? John, do you know who's not at your table today? Is that desk normally empty? Was it empty yesterday? Macho men have the empty desk on purpose. What? You are, so I don't have to refigure out some absentees. Riles, who are you missing?
Katie Thorpe.
Okay, nobody else? Just 4 of you?
3 or 2?
Wyatt, who are you missing?
I don't know.
Dylan and,
Well, Dylan left. And then, I don't know this is here.
hang on. Are you missing anybody? Was it just 4 of you yesterday? Okay, does this make sense? I believe the AP board test question writers will want you to know the name or the terminology inversely proportional.
We had to know that in science lab.
So I would highlight that. Okay, highlight inversely proportional. This is how I would word a multiple choice question if I were asking about the rank size rule. What theory suggests that a city's population will be inversely proportional to its rank? That's why I would think you would need to know inversely proportional. If you do not understand it, let me show you what it means. Second largest is 2 over 1. We invert that, and the second largest is half of the size of the largest. We invert the third, it's 1/3. Invert means to turn over. So the third largest would be 1/3 the size of the largest. The fourth largest would be 1/4 the size of the largest. That's what inversely proportional means. That word identification of inversely proportional is how I would word the test on the AP exam. Okay. If you wrote a free response question and could not produce the words inversely proportional but could mathematically show that the fourth would be 1/4 and the third would be 1/3, they would get that you get it without that terminology. But in a multiple choice question, they might want you to recognize inverse proportionality. Okay. Now, do we need to do the math, or can you clearly see that Lyon is not 1/2, or Lyon is not 1/2 of Paris? Pretty clear, right? Marseille is not 1/3, it is way, way, way smaller. Okay, this is what makes sense to me. Paris, pretty central in the country, and incredibly large. French people do most of the relevant stuff in Paris. Thus, a second